Welcome back to Politics Nation. Midterm primaries are set for Tuesday in Georgia, the state where the 2020 election cycle came to a memorable end. Joining me now to talk about that and other hot political topics is my panel, former Republican strategist Rina Shah and Alencia Johnson, Chief Impact Officer of 1063 West Broad. Rina, let's start in Georgia. Former President Trump went all in for former Senator David Perdue in the Republican primary for governor because he wants to punish incumbent Governor Brian Kemp for refusing to overturn the 2020 election results. Now that Perdue is down big in the polls, Trump seems ready to abandon him regardless of what happens. The former president is going to claim he has a near flawless endorsement record. But isn't this a spectacular defeat for Trump if he can't convince Republican voters in Georgia to go along with his revenge scheme?
It's certainly looking really positive for those who wanted to see President Trump not have the influence that he potentially could have on this race between incumbent Governor Brian Kemp and David Perdue, a former U.S. Senator with high name ID, some real fundraising prowess there. Obviously a former U.S. Senator, so somebody who's able to raise money in a remarkable way. But the two things that I think that Perdue was missing that Trump really wanted to see was his loyalty. And secondly, the real showboat style that Trump really likes to see in a lot of his candidates that he does give endorsements to. But the real nail in the coffin for Perdue was this Fox News poll that showed him really down to Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp looking at 60 and Perdue at 28. Yeah. So, yeah, it's much like Trump to want to abandon the sinking ship, because why stick with that when Perdue doesn't look like he'll have the chance that he needs to unseat Kemp?
Alencia, a record 857,000 Georgians have voted early, many of them Republicans, since those are the most hotly contested primaries. But Democratic activists say they're having success changing their tactics to turn out voters despite new voter restriction laws passed by Republicans. As you look at the turnout situation in Georgia, what do you think it means for Stacey Abrams' effort to be the first black female governor in the country?
Well, I think the people that voted for her a few years ago are probably still energized about her candidacy and want to see her in the seat. This is something she's been campaigning for and something she's wanted for years. And the reality is that Georgia voters, Georgia Democratic voters, particularly black voters and young voters in Georgia, understand their power from the 2020 election when not only were they there's a record turnout in order to get President Biden elected, but they also elected two Democratic senators that have been the key deciding votes in the Senate right now. And so this is actually kind of good news for Stacey Abrams. While Democratic voters are trailing a little bit, we have to think about the voter suppression efforts that are unfortunately causing activists to have to use, to use new tactics in order to make sure that voters in order to make sure that voters are able to cast their ballots, even with these voter suppression laws. And so we've seen that in Georgia. And while Democrats are trailing in early voting, we do think they will make up for it when it comes to Tuesday, the election.
Yeah, and Georgia is responsible for it even being a 50-50 Senate with the break going to the Democratic vice president. Makes me sing Ray Charles and James Brown's song, Georgia on My Mind. But Rina, former President Trump's political influence may be waning in some races, but the big lie remains a powerful tool amongst Republicans, especially at the state level. The New York Times is out with an analysis today, finding that 357 GOP lawmakers in battleground states took steps to discredit or overturn the 2020 presidential election. That represents 44% of all Republicans in those state legislatures. And in Pennsylvania, you just saw the nomination of Doug Mastriano for governor, a man who used campaign funds to send 6 charter buses of protesters to the Capitol riots on January 6th. Experts worry if Mascherino is elected, he would have the power to create chaos during the 2024 presidential election. What should be done about these gathering threats to our democracy? Briefly, please.
Well, this is very new to our country, right? In the modern era, we haven't seen these kind of threats, so nobody really knows what to do with them. And a pinnacle of this big lie is how Trump continues to go around and talk about how the 2020 election could have been decertified. He uses that word. That word is very important, decertify the results. And so therefore, people are sort of like, yeah, that's a possibility. No, it's not. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution, nor in any state constitution that makes it possible for the president of the United States to do that. So it's very important that we push back on that at an individual level. If you're a person who's concerned about maybe even your neighbor thinks that, push back on them, show them the facts, because right now nobody seems to control it.
We need everybody to push back. I wish I had more time. Thank you to Alencia Johnson, Rina Shah. Up next, my final thoughts. Stay with us.